So the next is Ty. Ty, welcome. Ty is a manager of business engagement for the workforce knowledge. You know, he is gonna be talking today about second chance hiring. And I'm gonna shout out to you today. I wasn't on the advance. Someone told me your power speaker. And I know, I do believe now what's coming to you guys. So there you go.
Thank you. The pleasure is now on. I appreciate that. So if I wander a little bit, is this camera going to follow me or do I need to stand in one place?
I think it's gonna stay one place.
Okay, because I'm a roamer, so I'm gonna have to fence myself in here. Thank you so much. As Samuel said, my name is Tyree, and I do a couple of things that I feel very lucky to be able to do. Number one, I work in workforce development for Workforce Knowledge. There's going to be no slide, people, so you're just going to have to put up with me. I'm sorry. I work in workforce development, and in my work doing that, what I do is talk to employers quite a bit about their need for employees and how to hold on to those employees. I'm also lucky enough to run my own small nonprofit, Code Recovery Career Services, and what we do there is to help individuals who are in recovery from addiction, homelessness, and past criminal justice involvement find and keep work. And both of those things are incredibly rewarding. So I heard Sean talk about in his presentation, when you talk to someone, you can't talk about yourself a whole bunch. But I'm going to break that rule right now. I'm going to be like an opera singer kind of warming up backstage. I'm going to talk about me, a little while, and I'm going to get to you. So, I have kind of a story. Some of you here that are in the audience know a little bit about this, but I'm going to share this with the folks who have never seen me before and don't know who the heck I am. So, I didn't really know that I had a drug problem until my drug dealer told me that he was worried about me. It's absolutely true. I heard someone back there laugh. Thank you, ma'am. I appreciate that. Totally unsolicited, by the way, but I'm my coffee. So, and the reason why this was particularly important was at the time there were some things going on in my life that actually made it hard for me to believe that I had that I actually might have a problem because professionally I was doing incredibly well. So, a couple of things that you might not know about me just from seeing me here today. I'm lucky enough to have a college degree. I am lucky enough to have accomplished a few things in my career professionally, and I also interviewed pretty well. But I can assure you that many of the employers that are watching this today, and people that might see this in the future, if I walked into the building for a job interview and I interviewed really well, they wouldn't hire me. Wouldn't hire me. Now, I know you might be thinking, maybe, Ty, it's because you're just too damn charming. You can say it out loud. It's okay. It's okay. But in truth, it's because, like I mentioned, I've had a very twisty journey. Because back in 2007, when I was succeeding so mightily in the financial services industry, working for a Fortune 50 company, it actually just been recognized nationally as one of the top 10% of salespeople. So I was doing pretty well professionally. And I was getting a nice paycheck too. But I was also living a double life. Because by day, while I was this professional guy walking through nice offices and talking to nice people, by night I was an alcoholic and a hard drug addict, a crack cocaine addict, actually. And if you think that at the end of the week, when you get to Friday, you can be tired of being just one person. Imagine what it would be like when you're living as two people, especially when those are two people that frankly you kind of hate. And I was miserable all the time. Now, in 2008, something kind of big happened. The recession happened, and I lost my big job. But you know, I didn't lose that big drug habit. So that kind of started a period for me that I often refer to as a slow motion train wreck. Over the next few years, I kind of worked. I still had some moderate level of success, but I wasn't able to achieve the same heights I had before because, quite frankly, I just didn't have the capacity to do so. Now, in 2012, I did actually manage to quit crack cocaine, and I did that by using a very little known method that even medical professionals will admit is effective. I quit crack cocaine by switching it out. Now, I didn't say it was smart. I said it was effective, and it was incredibly effective. I didn't smoke more crack after that, but it also broke some other habits like sleeping indoors, being able to hold a job, eating on a regular basis, because within a couple of years, quite frankly, I was homeless on the streets of Seattle with a backpack on my back, unable to hold a job. Didn't know where my next meal would come from, or when I would sleep next. And I was completely comfortable with that Because living as one person, even if it's a person on the street, in my mind, kind of beats trying to live this double life. And over the next couple of years, I had to experience some things. I was arrested and convicted and jailed multiple times. The nicest jail in King County, by the way, is in Kirkland, if anybody's interested. Right, it's not even close, not even close. And I'm a perfectly brief, so that's the next thing that I really hate about that experience. So I was arrested, convicted, and jailed multiple times. I was committed to a mental institution. I had failed state rehab and was also lucky enough to survive a couple of suicide attempts because, you know, things got kind of dark, as you can imagine. When I got sober in 2016, besides putting my personal life back together, I faced some really significant bias, but the bias that I faced had absolutely nothing to do with the color of my skin. The bias that I faced was one that faces a lot of people in this country. And when I say a lot of people, what I'm talking about is there are 77 million people in this country, according to the FBI, who have criminal record. 77 million. In Washington State, there's about 2.1 million people, according to the Washington State Patrol, that have criminal convictions. Now, the problem with that is that although many states have enacted what we call ban the box laws, it basically says, as an employer, you can no longer ask people on the job application whether or not they have criminal convictions, which is great because the net effect is that it has allowed more people to get job interviews and get an opportunity to impress a hiring manager or an HR person. But the problem is, there's another couple of boxes that we have to think about. So there's the box that people put folks who have criminal convictions in. Yeah, maybe we're going to hire them, but it's only going to be for an entry-level job. It's only going to be minimum wage, which is kind of what I think, because despite having great work history and a couple of college degrees and interviewing really well, the first job I was able to get was part-time as a janitor. Now, don't get me wrong, it's honorable work and it's necessary work, but in a lot of ways, being a janitor and being homeless ain't that different. People don't look at you when you're on the street. And people don't look at you when you're a 40-something-year-old guy and you're scrubbing toilets and $50. So it's kind of discouraging. And the process with folks that have criminal conviction, what we go through in the interview process is pretty much the same across the country. So one of the things that I'm lucky enough to do is to coach individuals who have kind of did like what I did, burned their lives to the ground, and are now trying to find work. And the process of looking for work is always the same. I go in, I have my interview, they kind of like me. They like my resume. Then they run that background check. Now the conversation changes because no longer are they talking about my experience or what I can do for the company. Now we're looking at the past. They're focused on stuff that happened years ago, which tells them nothing about who that person is today, who is on Zoom or talking to them on the phone or sitting in a conference room. And so companies do a really, really great job of making the first inquiry, which is typically something like, we see you have some criminal convictions in your background. Can you give us a little bit of detail about what happened? They make some sort of inquiry like that. Great, to kind of get clarification, but it is again backward looking. I contend that the more important question is, what's been going on in your life since all that happened? And then just let the person talk to you. And then you can actually notice a couple of things. So number one, did they tell you before you ran the background check that you were going to find stuff in the background check? Because if so, that's some honesty. That might be a good quality to have. Maybe. When they gave you the explanation about what happened, did they take responsibility or they pointed the finger or blame at someone else? Because if they can take accountability, I have a good quality in it. So these are things to notice. And then just hear from them what they've done with their lives since then. I have a case for this work for me directly. So after I had that janitor job for about a year and I've been sober for about a year, actually got an opportunity to have a really good interview at a pretty decent company. And I was a little nervous because I needed to go in and tell them about my history. Of course, they asked me, why do you have this 2-year job gap? Well, let me tell you. They got a story they weren't expecting, but I was very forthcoming. Right? And then they said, well, what's I have a story to tell. Well, been in recovery for about a year now, worked with a sponsor, Here's his numbers that you can call him anytime. By the way, I've been working this part-time job. Here's a letter of recommendation from the owner of the company. She said you can reach out when you need to. I've also been volunteering at a food bank. Here's a letter of recommendation from the supervisor. Now, I didn't tell him I was at the food bank because I had community service to do. I'm not too famous for being at the food bank. Right? Because I'm at the food bank. Okay. Oh, by the way, I'm reconnected with my friends and my family, and they provide me great support. So by virtually every measure you can think of, it was clear that I was trying to live my life in a different way than I had before. But only because they took the time to ask the question. Did they know that? So Brian is going to talk a little bit right after me about how curiosity can be important. And this is what I encourage HR people and hiring managers and business owners to do as well. Don't go with what you assume you know. Because if we take the time to ask questions, you might learn some stuff. This not only goes in business, this kind of goes in life. The next time you're on Facebook and somebody says something real stupid and you're ready to respond in chaos and tell them about themselves, slow down and ask yourself, could I be wrong? Hiring managers, could I be wrong about this candidate? And this feeling that I got in my gut as soon as I found out that they had a criminal record. And would having more information help? I would say that in virtually every situation, yes, having more information would help. Because if we can take the time to slow down and gather more information, only two things can happen. And I argue that both things are good. Number one, you can actually get some information that changes your mind and moves you in a different direction. But the other thing that can happen is that you can get information and confirm what you were thinking about. These are good. And now you have more solid ground to stand on. So as I kind of leave here, just kind of finish up, just a couple of things that I want to encourage you. Number one, take time to kind of slow down. And kind of learn a little more about your fellow man, whether it's a job applicant or somebody in line, at the coffee shop, or somebody in your family that you're about to sit with at Thanksgiving and is going to say something politically that makes you really mad. Take the time to slow down a little bit. The second thing is, in every comeback story that we see, in a movie, in a book, on TV, when somebody's kind of making what they call the hero's journey, they're coming back from something and overcoming some challenges. There's always a person or a group of people that show up at just the right time, magically, to help that person on the way. If you know somebody in your life who's doing the right thing, and you can be that person for them, do the best you can to be that person that helps them along their way. I'm not talking about a handoff. I'm not talking about charity. I'm talking about catching people doing the right thing and recognizing that. And when you do, try to help them if you can. Thank you so much for your time.